After a month's time, the Exeter returned to the planet Makis. It had been an uneasy time for Shelby. The good thing was that the missions that had been encountered since their departure from Makis had been relatively mundane. Star charting, observation of assorted astronomical phenomenon. The bad thing was that she was feeling ill at ease. The business on Makis remained a major sore spot, and nothing would have suited Shelby better than to have it end in a positive manner. Her gut feeling was that Howman was going to see the light and realize that he could have it all. When they had made their initial approach to Makis, however, and Shelby desired to speak to him, he had seemed tense and distracted. It made her uneasy. Garbeck insisted on increasing the security guards, so when Shelby went down to Makis, she had 3 guards. Howman's gaze flickered over the trio of guards. More protection than before, Captain. Do you believe that we provide a threat? Simply being cautious, Howman. We live in hazardous times. Unfortunately, when we don't have the official bonds of alliances, it's difficult to know whom we can trust. Sometimes, Captain, those we trust can turn out to be our greatest betrayers. Howman, what are you referring to, if I may ask? Howman took a deep breath. Corinder, the next planet over in the system. They thought our scientists would not learn of their betrayal. We discovered signs of actual genetic tampering in the insect specimens we managed to capture. Tampering that infected the insects with a disease that ravaged Corinder more than 2 centuries ago. In the spirit of sharing, they decided to give the disease in a more heavily mutated form to us, with the insects acting as carriers. And I have to tell you, Captain, we are incensed. His fists kept clenching and unclenching, as if he was envisioning what it would be like to have the collective throats of the Corindurians between his fingers. They tried to annihilate us, through dark and pernicious means. But why, Howman? Why would they do such a thing? We can only surmise at this point, but Corinder, you see, is massively overcrowded. They have no self-control, the Corindurians. By wiping out our population, they would then be able to take up residence on this world. Well, if overpopulation is what the Corindurians are concerned about, then we will be more than happy to help them solve that problem. Shelby did not like the sound of that. You're saying you're ready to go to war over this? Of course we are. And we have you to thank, Captain, for showing us the way. I think it very likely that we will wind up joining your Federation, for the truth of just how dangerous a galaxy we live in has been underscored for us. But first, we will dispatch our enemies. Shelby sat lost in thought in her ready room, and didn't realize that Garbeck was standing in front of her until she heard the loud clearing of her throat. Contemplating suicide, Captain? It seemed like an exceptionally bizarre question until Shelby remembered that she was holding Calhoun's sword. She allowed a small smile. That is the traditional remedy for failure, isn't it? Throwing oneself on one's sword? Garbeck looked genuinely puzzled. Failure? Captain, your instincts were correct. Since the insects apparently involved attempts by another race to exterminate the Macusians, that certainly would have fallen within the parameters of permissible involvement, even under the Prime Directive. There's no reason to give up at this point. Shelby sighed. Howman has informed me in no uncertain terms that he doesn't want our help. Well, that's that. Just a reminder, Starfleet has informed us that we are expected at the reception on Nimbus 2 in 3 days, as part of the welcoming ceremony for their joining the Federation. Shelby interrupted her. I thought we could leave a negotiating party. Captain, if there's one thing they taught us at the Academy, it's that a Starfleet captain can do anything, but not everything. But there has to be something we can do. Something. As a matter of fact, Captain, you might want to try to get some sleep. You look exhausted. The days were turning into weeks on Yakaba, and Mackenzie Calhoun was slowly coming to the realization that his constant refrain of passing through might be serving as a nice, comforting personal mantra with very little relation to the reality of his situation. he was marooned. The people of Nerin took to him as quickly and as easily as he in turn took to the job of Magister. His prisoner Cusac's leg had healed, and the door and lock had been repaired so that he was unable to go anywhere. Still, Cusac's continued imprisonment while the Circuit Judicial was making his rounds was of concern to Calhoun, primarily because he didn't know what Cusac's still-at-liberty brothers were up to. There was active discussion about the prospect of chasing them down. They were, after all, responsible for the death of the Magister. Calhoun was more than ready to attend to it, but the consensus of the council was that, since they had apparently departed out of Nerin County, they were no longer of any concern. A lot of Calhoun's time as Magister was spent attending to small squabbles and such in the city itself, and he spent the rest of the time helping Rila around the farm. She seemed appreciative for the help, and of course, Moke loved having him around. He had one other endeavor that he embarked upon in his spare moments, and that was searching for the crash site. If he'd had some sort of air vehicle that would allow him to get an aerial view of the area, he would have been able to locate it in no time. As it was, he had to depend on his own 2 feet or, at best, the Lucab. At least Tapinza seemed to know enough to stay out of his way. The problem was that Tapinza remained the only shot he had at getting off Yakaba. One evening, Calhoun sat on the edge of the porch staring up at the stars. He heard a soft footfall behind him, and he didn't have to turn to know that it was Rila. She rested a hand on his shoulder. "Thinking about how dry it is?" He lied to her and said yes. "So was I. I'm sensing things as being appropriate." Calhoun looked up at the cloudless night sky. "Doesn't look that way from here. Looks pretty normal. Which is to say, bone dry." She tapped her breast. "It has nothing to do with how things look. It's how they feel here. Oh yes, yes. This is going to be a large one." Suddenly, Calhoun could feel the wind whipping up more fiercely than it had before. The clouds were sweeping in now, thick and dark. Rila's eyes were closed, her head tilted back, her arms out to either side as if she was gathering in the random elements of the weather to herself. It seemed more magic than science, though perhaps science, in the final analysis, was simply magic with delusions of lack of grandeur. Then large droplets of water fell in Calhoun's face. In fairly short order, the rain came down harder and faster. Rila danced about, pirouetting in the rain. "Rila, why do you do it? Why do you bestow this miracle on people who don't appreciate it?" "Because I have to give it to somebody. I'm hoping that they come around. If they never do, it's their loss." She grabbed Calhoun's hands and hauled him to his feet. She spun him about until they were thrown off balance and tumbled to the ground. She rolled up against him and kissed him. He put his arms around her, returning the kiss with passion, trailed his hand down her back, and felt the curve of her spine. The storm increased in intensity, matching the depth of her desire and need. And then, very slowly, he released her. He cleared his throat. "I think I'd better check on the lookout in the shed." He rose and walked away from her as quickly as he could. If he looked at her at that moment, he would be back to her and in her arms, and then there would be no going back, anywhere, to anyone. He stayed out in the shed for a long time, then crept stealthily back into the house. And sure enough, there Rila was, seated in a chair, doing needlework. "Calhoun, I thought you were going to stay out there all night." She set her needlework aside. "She must be very fortunate, the other woman, whoever she is. Only weeks ago I was terrified of you. Now I'm practically attacking you, and being disappointed when you don't have similar feelings for me. I do, Rila. I do have similar feelings for you, but if you and I go in the direction that I think we were heading, I won't be able to pass through anymore. Sooner or later, fairly or unfairly, I'm going to resent you for it. She leaned forward and took his hand in hers. You've known women before, I assume. On occasion. But I shut myself off because it was what I needed to do to function. To do what needed to be done. What needed to be done, Calhoun? Everything. Rila nodded slowly. Everything. I see. And how do you know when you're done? He smiled sadly. When you die. She looked at him for a time and felt her eyes tearing up. You know what, Calhoun? I'm still glad you're here. Whatever you can give me, and whatever I can give you, well, that'll be just fine. He drew closer to her then and put an arm around her shoulder, and stayed there until the sun rose in the morning. Days had passed, and Rila was feeling in a particularly good mood as she came in from having harvested some of the liquid crops. The plants had provided her with a goodly amount of juice that she would be able to bring to town and trade for. She had decided to get an early morning start. It was surprisingly cool. She could feel it in her bones. She would be able to produce rain again quite soon, perhaps even today. Moke was suddenly in front of her and pointing toward the shed. Ma, look! Calhoun emerged from the shed and he was rolling a sail skipper in front of him. Ma, we built it, Mac and me, from spare parts of stuff we had lying around. We're going to go out and ride it. Rila knew better than to try and stem the tide of enthusiasm that was gushing from her son. Yes, yes, fine. Calhoun clapped his hands together and rubbed them briskly. Shall we take a whirl at it, Moke? Moke needed no further urging. Encouraged by the steady wind, within moments Calhoun and Moke were zipping away. Then Rila climbed aboard the Lou cab and headed into town. She was actually surprised when her arrival was not only greeted positively, but enthusiastically. Most looked almost relieved that she had shown up. Prestomilos headed across the street toward her. Rila, how goes matters with you? They go fine, but would you kindly tell me what's happening? Well, to be perfectly candid, it's been a while since our last rainfall. She was surprised. Not really. I made it rain just the other day. The maester stepped out of the crowd to explain. You made it for yourself. We saw that the skies had darkened in the general area of your homestead, but there was a pretty steady wind around this town, almost like a barrier, and it appeared to keep the clouds at bay. We really didn't get much of anything. One of the younger people came to her. Please help us. Rila patted the young girl on the arm. As it so happens, your timing couldn't be better. The conditions are exactly right. Rila walked out into the middle of the street. She reached out with her heart, her mind. She could sense clouds wafting in, and she urged the breeze to push them toward her. She felt the heaviness of the rain contained within the clouds and urged them to release, caressing them with her mind the way a lover would. Everything felt normal. Everything felt right. And then, everything felt wrong. The breezes whipped around her, but did not attend to her. Is there a problem, Rila? It was the maestress who was asking, and her pure contempt prompted Rila to turn and face her with barely contained anger. What did you do? It was exactly the sort of opening that the maestress had been waiting for. Oh, is that the way of it? You withhold your abilities when my people ask for it, and then try to blame it on me, making it seem as if I am acting to hurt them. Rila saw the anger on the faces of the people around her. "I'm not withholding anything." Someone yelled from the crowd,
You heard her! She tried to blame the mistress! She's holding back on us!
Her lukab, tethered nearby, let out a loud, mournful howl of concern. Rila either had to cut and run, or she was going to try and stay there and convince them that they were simply wrong. She made the only decision that seemed reasonable. She bolted. She dropped the satchels of her crop and vaulted onto the back of the lukab. The lukab barreled forward while townsfolk behind them hurled rocks, shoes, pieces of wood, anything that they could get their hands on. When a rock nailed her squarely on the side of the head, Rila cried out and almost lost her grip on the lukab. When the lukab had put some distance between itself and the city, only then did it slow down somewhat. She could feel the massive lump already swelling on the side of her head. She knew she was in danger of losing consciousness. She started picturing Moke and Calhoun. And then she started thinking about Moke's father, about that evening, that one insane evening when he had come to her like something from Kolkar on high, the way he had smiled at her, and he'd had those flashing, mysterious eyes and a voice as loud as thunder and soft as the caress of an errant breeze, both together. She started to drift. When she hit the ground, the jolt was more than enough to propel her to full wakefulness. She looked around. The lukab had brought her safely home. Rila hauled herself to her feet. The world spun around her once more before settling down. She lurched into the house and staggered toward her bedroom. She flopped onto her simple bed without even bothering to remove any of her clothes, and within moments was fast asleep. She had no idea what time it was when she awoke. The only thing she did know was that the room was filling up fast with smoke, and she could hear the crackling of flames as they licked hungrily at the outside of the house. At which point, she fell back into a deep sleep. In her quarters, sleeping, Shelby dreamed that she and Calhoun were together. She was berating him for getting himself killed and talking to him about how the Macusians were going to get into a war that could end up depopulating their world as surely as the bugs would have done. In the dream, Calhoun reminded her, "You want to stop it." "I can't, Mac. Can't or won't. Same thing. Not to me, Epi. Can't means being faced with something so overwhelming that no amount of determination or willpower is going to accomplish the task at hand. Won't is a matter of choice, short for will not. It's a conscious decision not to accomplish something. That's what you're doing here. Don't talk to me about what I'm doing. You're dead and I'm foundering." He put his arms around her, and she felt as if she was melting against him. And it was at that point that she heard a high-pitched tone, rather like a comlink. She sat up. "Shelby here, go ahead."
"Captain, we're 10 hours out from Nimbus. Starfleet wanted to know if we could arrive sooner since some of the ceremonies have been moved around, and naturally I had to check with you."
"Turn us around, Lieutenant. Take us back to Macus, Warp 9. Shelby then proceeded to get dressed. The chime came from her door just as she was pulling on her boots. Garbeck entered, looking as if she'd been shot out of a cannon. "Captain, I was just informed that I ordered us to return to Macus. Yes, that's correct. You should be pleased, number one. It came as a result of your advice." Garbeck paled slightly. "My advice, Captain?" "Yes. You told me I should get some rest. Once I did, things became a good deal clearer. If the choice I'm being given is to appear on a ceremonial basis at Nimbus, or to have a chance to accomplish something back at Macus, then I'm going to opt for the latter. Accept, Captain, that going in with all phasers blasting isn't going to improve matters. I'm not going in with all of them blasting, number one. Perhaps one or two of them, but not all. You surprise me as well, Captain." "How so, Garbeck?" It took you 62 hours to turn us around. I'd thought you would have had us heading back within 10. Calhoun could scarcely believe it. He had been walking here, there, and everywhere throughout the area whenever he had moments free, trying to trace what direction he had come from, seeking out with what seemed growing futility the crash site where his shuttle was piled up. And now he'd found it, thanks to the guidance of a small boy who had no clue at all that Calhoun was looking for it. In short, thanks to Moke, he had lucked onto what he had been searching for all this time.
This way, Calhoun! Now! That way, Calhoun!
Moke had been a virtual font of barking orders as Calhoun steered the sail skipper, trying to keep up with the vagaries of the wind while, at the same time, adhering to the rapid-fire directions that Moke shouted out to him. Every time he'd angle the sail skipper this way or that way, Moke would howl with laughter. It was nice to see the boy enjoying himself, and it forced him to dwell, however briefly and unwillingly, on all the years he had missed in the growth of his own son, Zion, the son that he had rediscovered, only to lose him shortly thereafter. He chided himself mentally. There was simply no point to berating himself over dwelling in might-have-beens. Such second-guessing had never been his style, and he certainly wasn't about to start now. Things were what they were, and second-guessing himself wasn't any way to live his life. He'd made his decisions, and he had lived with them. Yet here was this boy. This boy. He could make up for Zion, maybe just a little, if he, Calhoun... If he what, stayed? Denied what he was? Except, what was he, really? Was he a Starfleet captain? Or was that merely a crafted facade that covered the fact that this life, wild and free and open, suited him far more? There was Rila, who he knew was attracted to him, and the boy, Moke. Well, he was just hungry for a father figure. Any father figure, it seemed, which really wasn't at all that flattering to Calhoun. Even so, though, what else could one expect of a child so young and desperate for attention? Nevertheless, the sensation of the bridge beneath his feet, the hissing of the door from the captain's ready room when he strode out to his post, the array of stars that hurtled by a starship cruising the spaceways, and Shelby. Elizabeth Paula Shelby. At night, when his keen hearing told him that Rila was right down the hall, breathing steadily and very likely amenable to whatever he might fancy, there would be Shelby in his mind's eye. If Zion was the son who had slipped through his fingers, so too had Shelby been the fiancée who had eluded him, or he had eluded her. It had been more of a mutual elusiveness, it seemed, neither of them ready, neither of them willing to give of themselves in the way that marriage truly required. But she haunted his waking moments, even as the relative simplicity of life on Yakaba called to him.
What's that, Mac?
Moke was pointing ahead of them, pointing up at a ridge at the top of a small bluff. Calhoun, stirred from his reverie even as he automatically guided the sail skipper with ease, looked where Moke was indicating. He nearly fell off the sail skipper. Calhoun recognized the debris of the shuttle almost immediately and guided the sail skipper over toward it. He clambered to the summit and hauled himself up. Pieces of various sizes were half buried in the hardened sand all around. Moke clambered up beside him.
What do you think it is, Mac?
I don't know, Moke. Calhoun disliked lying to the boy, but he didn't want to explain the details of where he hailed from. He proceeded, bit by bit, to look over the entire crash site to try and determine just what, if anything, was salvageable. Even though he knew he was wasting his time, the first thing he looked over was the comm system. Very quickly, he confirmed that there was nothing remotely usable in this ghastly mess. He could sit there and try to fix it from now to doomsday, and still never hear anything except for the sound of his own voice, which, he remembered with a rueful smile, was what Shelby had always claimed was his favorite sound anyway. The problem was that the last time he'd taken the shuttle out, it had been rigged for scientific investigation. If he'd been taking it out into battle, it would have been replete with weapons. As it was, he managed to find the equipment box. There were a couple of phasers in it, but they had been damaged in the crash and the energy had leaked out of them. If he'd found them earlier on, he might have been able to find a way to shut down the leak. As it was, the uncharged phasers would only be functional as weapons if someone happened to wander close enough to him so that he could bash their brains in with the barrel. The only thing he did find were 2 thermal mines, which could be activated by means of a remote control. They were used primarily for excavation. Moke's enthusiasm was unabated. "What do you think it is, Mac? Where did it come from?" "I'm not sure, Moke." Calhoun pocketed the mines. He managed to find a working tricorder as well, and this he stuck into the loose shirt that he was wearing. He certainly wouldn't have minded finding a working phaser. The placer weapons which existed on Yakuba were certainly lethal enough, but they were clumsy and hard to aim. Even the homing beacon had been smashed beyond repair in the crash. They had climbed down from the bluff, and a convenient crosswind caught up the sail skipper's sail, propelling them toward the homestead. Soon Moke was pointing frantically at the distant point where his home was situated. There, spiraling toward the sky, was a fearsome plume of thick black and gray smoke. After they reached the house, Calhoun ripped the sail clean off the sail skipper. He kept telling himself that everything was going to be all right. Hell, Rila probably wasn't even there. The heat was so intense that he bunched the cloth from the sail and held it in front of his face, breathing in and out of it, searched for a break in the firewall, found it, and shoved his way through.
"Rila!"
He ran to her bedroom just in time to get a glimpse of her lying on her bed. Smoke was pouring in everywhere, and Rila was just starting to sit up, looking dazed and bewildered. Calhoun leaped through the flames that had sprung up between Rila and him. He saw to his horror that Rila was on fire. He whipped around the sailcloth and practically tackled Rila with it. For a moment, he thought the entire roof was coming down on them. But then he heard the thunder. Rain began to pour, torrential buckets cascading down. The raging fire outside flickered and he charged the window, clutching Rila tight to him. He felt searing pain and then the cold, healing touch of the pouring rain. He looked up. The clouds were converging around the house like things alive. Moke was screaming for his mother as he ran toward her while the rain pounded the flames into non-existence. Rila looked raggedly up at Calhoun. "Better late than never, huh, Calhoun?" "Rila, did you see who did this?" She shook her head, but then she told him what had happened in the city. All Calhoun said was, "I'll take care of it." He then proceeded to do just that. The battle fleet had been mustered. Even Howman had to admit that it was not necessarily the most impressive of endeavors. Their weaponry, while effective for their own needs, was not remotely on par with something like, say, that of the Exeter. In the big picture, it was clearly drawn that the Mercusians were going to have to strike back at the Corundurians and their leader, the Ferghut. Howman remembered the last time he had seen Ferghut, how complimentary Ferghut was over the Mercusian advancements. He had flattered Howman endlessly to put him and the rest of the Mercusians off the scent while the Corundurians endeavored to exterminate a race so that they would have somewhere to move to. The Mercusians did not have a large number of ships that were capable of making an assault, but with any luck, it was not going to be necessary. The Corundurians were no more scientifically advanced than the Mercusians. The bridge around Howman was humming with activity. "Howman, we will be within firing range of Corinder in just under 15 minutes. Another young man in charge of sensor scans called out, "Incoming fleet of 8 Corundurian vessels." Howman addressed his crew and the other ships in his fleet. "My fellow Mercusians, upon my command, engage the enemy at will." The young man monitoring the sensors suddenly called out, "Howman,
A Starfleet vessel, dropping out of warp. They've targeted us, sir, and the Corundurians. I believe that this vessel is the same that came to mock us some time ago.
The Exeter, having dropped out of warp, moved at high speed to insert itself directly between the two fleets that were converging on one another.
Halman, an incoming signal.
A moment later, Shelby's face appeared on the screen, but the screen itself was split, indicating a dual transmission. Halman recognized the other image immediately. The Ferg hut. Shelby spoke with authority.
You've no doubt noticed that my vessel is between your fleets which are converging upon one another. Halman, the Thurgot here claims that he has no idea why you are attacking. Have you sent him a formal declaration of war outlining his transgressions?
Halman was livid. Why in the world should I outline that which he already knows? The Furcut's expression was inscrutable.
Indulge me, Halman.
And so Halman proceeded to lay out in fast, broad strokes the nature of their grievance toward Corinder. As the Furcut listened, his full face grew darker and more serious. When Halman finished, Shelby spoke to the Furcut.
Do you have any response?
The Furcut shook his head in surprise.
I am shocked at the nature of these accusations. We do not desire war with our good neighbors. These studies that they claim to have made, connecting this insect infestation and the disease it carries with us, are...
Shelby interrupted him.
100% accurate. I've had my own people make their own investigations on these creatures. The Corundurians are responsible for attempted genocide.
The Furcut looked even more stunned.
Captain, would it be possible for you to transmit a copy of the report? Absolutely. But I'm telling you right now, Furcut, that this is only going to buy you a short amount of time. 1 hour. The Macusians demand vengeance, and frankly, I don't blame them. But I want to avoid a war that could wind up with both planets as little more than floating cinders.
The Furcut looked very grave.
1 hour then. And Captain, whatever happens, thank you for your endeavor to stave off a conflict that no one wants.
His image then blanked out, and Shelby's filled up the entirety of the screen.
I can count on you, Halman, to hold your position and keep your fleet in check.
Halman nodded. Peace is always desirable, Captain. The screen blanked, a starfield returning to replace it. When Maester Tapinza saw Calhoun riding into town that morning, he made a beeline for him. I heard. Is Rila all right? Calhoun looked at him as if he were some sort of bacteria. Are you saying you weren't part of it? Part of it? I was nowhere near. I wouldn't be a part to such things. Ask anyone. How convenient for you, Tapinza. Tapinza squared his shoulders. Look, Magister. I actually have feelings for Rila. I would have done everything within my power to prevent the awful situation yesterday, her being attacked in town and the burning of her farm. Was any of it saved? Calhoun studied him carefully, thoughtfully. It needs to be rebuilt. Tapinza nodded eagerly. I can provide her with whatever raw materials are needed, but manpower might be a bit more problematic. Don't worry about manpower. I've got that covered. Calhoun turned and strode into the saloon as if he owned the place. Tapinza followed him. Most of the prominent citizens and most of the useless ones were there for breakfast. Calhoun pointed to Hotchkiss, the biggest, most physically intimidating man in town. You are going to help rebuild her house. Hotchkiss looked at Calhoun with dead eyes. Takes a lot for an armed man to threaten an unarmed one. Put your hands up, Hotchkiss. Hotchkiss did as he was told. Then Calhoun unbuckled the belt that held his plazers and strapped the belt around Hotchkiss's waist. Hotchkiss stared in mute shock. Hotchkiss, you're going to help rebuild her house, or I am going to hurt you. Hotchkiss didn't even hesitate. With both his hands, he went for the guns. Calhoun snagged both arms at the wrists and stopped them dead, bare inches from the holsters.
Hotchkiss tried to whip his arms up and around and lunge at Calhoun. Instead, Calhoun twisted around and lifted the bigger man into the air. He slammed him down onto a nearby table. Reaching down, Calhoun removed the holsters from around Hotchkiss's waist. Hotchkiss, you are going to help rebuild her house. Hotchkiss managed a nod. Calhoun picked half a dozen men and told them the same thing. Each nodded. At that moment, the Maester's Caulfield barreled into the tavern looking daggers at Calhoun.
Magister, are you threatening these people?
No, I have enough volunteers. The house will still be rebuilt. It's the right thing to do. I can force reparations to be made, or I can just start killing people. Would that please you? The Maester stepped toward him defiantly.
Try that, and you'll have to start with me.
Calhoun's hand speared toward her throat.
Ah!
But Calhoun's hand stopped short before he made contact. He snapped his fingers in irritation as if he just remembered something. Oh, that's right. I already killed my quota of little old ladies this year. Sorry. It was Hotchkiss who let out a snorting laugh that touched off a chain reaction. The Maesteress turned on her heel and strode out of the bar, accompanied by more guffaws and snickers. Later, the Maesteress came to see Tepinza in his house. She whirled on him like a small, angry dynamo.
Where were you, Tepinza? That man humiliated me in front of the town. I am a maestress. You are a maester. Calhoun is obviously becoming a threat to that.
Tepinza looked at her calmly. Maestress, I am attending to it. She smiled at that, a broad, toothy smile. And then, to Tepinza's shock and distaste, she got up on her toes and kissed him.
Tepinza, get Calhoun.
She turned and bustled out of Tepinza's home even as he drew a sleeve across his mouth to try and eliminate the foul taste from his lips. He heard snickering chortles from behind him. He turned and saw Timo and Kinos emerging from the adjoining room. Timo had a sneer on his face. Who would have thought that the old creature had that much juice in her? Tepinza took 2 quick strides toward them, swung his hand, and connected with Timo's jaw, knocking him off his feet. Shut up. You're lucky I'm letting you live. When I told you that you were to check to make certain that Rila wasn't home before you torched her house, what happened? Timo shook his head. We didn't see her there. And even if you had, Timo, you'd still have done it, because you felt you wanted to teach Calhoun a lesson. I wanted to teach him a lesson as well. What possible need is Rila going to have for me when she's got Calhoun there to satisfy her every problem? Timo spoke up. We want to go after Calhoun. You're the one who instructed us to stay out of the city. Of course I instructed you to do that. Calhoun recruited several deputy magisters to provide round-the-clock protection for the city. They're all instructed to shoot you on sight. You'll get your chance at Calhoun, but it will be under my terms and at the time that I dictate. Timo seemed anxious to get started. And when will that be? Tepinza smiled mirthlessly. When Krut comes. It takes one out-of-towner to kill another. And believe me, Krut's about as out of town as you can get. And at that moment, Krut's space vehicle was angling down toward the planet's surface in preparation for his showdown with Mackenzie Calhoun. Aumann was not seated, unlike everyone else in the Exodus conference room. The Furcut will not come. Garbeck cast a look of mild frustration in Shelby's direction. It had taken a good deal of talking to get Halman to come there. Shelby looked at Halman as if she understood his frustration. As I told you before, the Furcut has been in contact with us. He said that he has every intention of addressing the issues and problems that you have brought forward. It certainly seemed as if Halman's prediction was holding up, because none of the 5 Corundurians who filed into the conference lounge was the Furcut. One of the Corundurians stepped forward. I am Shuffer, head of the Science Council. The Furcut did not feel his presence was required. Shelby was astonished. Not required? Shuffer, your worlds are on the brink of war. Shuffer nodded stiffly. We are here at his service. We have come bearing a message directly from him. He handed Shelby a computer card. She inserted it into the proper slot on the computer and the Furcut's image appeared on the screen. He looked genuinely apologetic.
My good and historically supportive Malcusian friends, it is clear that your conclusions were correct. This vicious attempt against the entire Malcusian race did in fact have its origins with the Corundurians. In the course of my investigation, I quickly discerned the origins of the plot. Indeed, the only place from which it could have originated, my Science Council. I have decided that since their crime was against the Malcusians, then it is to you that I must give them over to suffer whatever punishment you deem worthy.
The Furcut bowed slightly, and his image disappeared. The scientists looked mad with fear. One of them clutched at Shuffer's robes.
This can't be true. It can't be happening.
Howman's face looked as if a storm cloud had passed over it. So, your own leader gives you up. Shuffer, the head scientist, began screaming.
He knew! He knew everything! He ordered us to do it!
Howman rose, and the very weight of his presence drew all focus to him. I expected the Furcut to do anything other than offer up himself to Malcusian justice. However, I would consider his offering up these scientists to be acceptable. My people will be satisfied upon their execution. The scientists began wailing in fear.
I do not believe this! It cannot be happening!
In desperation, Shuffer turned to Shelby.
Captain, we are aboard a Federation starship. We ask for asylum. You cannot refuse us.
Cocking an eyebrow, Shelby turned to Garbeck. Is he correct, number one? Garbeck seemed surprised that Shelby was asking. Technically, Captain, you actually not only can refuse him, but you are obliged to do so. According to the Prime Directive, we cannot interfere with interplanetary politics. Shelby turned to Shuffer. If I save your lives, then nothing will be able to forestall a war. Number one, would you be so kind as to escort Howman and his prisoners to the transporter room so they are returned to the Malcusian vessel?
Please!
Then Garbeck led the shrieking scientists away. Howman nodded approvingly to Shelby. Well done, Captain. I'm sure that wasn't easy for you. But we all have to make compromises, don't we? After all, we must never forget the big picture. And please inform your United Federation that we would be honored to join. That's wonderful to hear, Howman. And Shelby remained in the conference lounge long after everyone had left, a piece of her dying every time she remembered the anguished cries of the scientists.